Right behind me is a spot that I'm going to be building a concrete slab. I need to relocate an existing shed. There's some prep work that needs to be done. With that said, let's get to it. Typically, I go right into starting a project when I make a video, but for this video, I'll be sharing an experience. I purchased 14 bags of 60-pound concrete mix. I always get a bag or two extra. Turns out going from the 80-pound bags to the 60-pound bags, I saved $2 for the same amount of concrete. If you're doing a big project, it's worth running the numbers. You might save a few bucks. I picked all my materials up ahead of time, so when I got ready to do the actual project, everything was on site. I just need to find a spot to store these so they are out of the weather. Once I have all I need, I'll try to get an early start on the project. The first thing I need to do is to map out the area. The concrete slab I'm going to pour is going to be 52 inches by 56 inches. Now that I have a visual for the perimeter of the slab, I'll go ahead and start digging up the grass. At this point, I have the grass removed and I'm down to the soil. It may be hard to see on camera, but the ground has a slope to it. In order to make the slab as level as possible, I'll have to do some prep work here. What I don't want to do here is to remove dirt from the top of the slope to try and make the slab level. That will make the slab too low. The best thing to do is to build up the low end. I'm trying to determine how much dirt do I need to bring in to build this up. Now, after taking a closer look, I'll need to bring in a good amount of dirt. This dirt has been baking in the sun, so it's pretty dry, and I'm not going to be able to compact it as good as I like as it is. To fix that, I'm going to wet it, and it should be a lot easier to compact. The water wasn't penetrating the soil as quickly as I liked, so to speed that up, I just mixed the dirt as I kept soaking it. After much effort poured into creating a solid base, it was time to move on to building the form. Now that I have the parts cut to size, I'll assemble the form with screws. And this is the entire form. I thought it was much easier to assemble it and drop it in place. The dirt pad could have been a little bit higher, but I'll address that part later. In the past, I've used wood stakes to hold my forms together. I've come to a conclusion that I'll be doing a lot of concrete projects in the future, so I bit the bullet and bought some metal stakes. I'm setting my first stake now, and I'm going to reference off of this. I'll drive the stake just below the top of the form. Now I'm going to place the second stake and drive that in. What I'm doing here is trying to determine how low I need to drive this stake. I'll be using the level to try and level the frame. Based on the level, this looks pretty good to me, so I'll drive in the first screw. I'll move back to the first stake, reference my level, drive in the second screw. I'll repeat these steps until I get all the stakes installed and the form is leveled. Once I got around to the back end, before driving in the stake, I checked the spacing, made the necessary adjustments so that it referenced the front, ensuring that I had a squared slab. The stakes has various holes you can choose from. While most construction workers would use double head nails, I decided to use screws. Screws fits the hole and it's less knocking on the frame. The form is installed and leveled, but I have some gaps below, which I'll take some dirt to fill those in. On its own, concrete is strong, but to give some additional reinforcement, I'll use some reinforcing mesh. I just need to trim it to fit within the form. And the piece I cut off, I'll just strap it to the rest of the mesh. To keep the mesh elevated off the dirt, I'm going to take some old cinder blocks that I had, break those into smaller pieces. This is one way you can go about it, or you can purchase the steel mesh chairs, which are used to elevate the mesh. This here is a cost-saving method, so anything to keep the cost down. One thing to keep an eye on here is to make sure the steel mesh is well below the surface of the form. I was planning to knock this out in one day, but I was fooled by the clouds. I thought it was gonna rain, and it didn't. But I'm not like all the way annoyed. The sun was pretty hot out, so I was okay with the break. About 3 days passed at this point, and I got back out early in the morning to get all my stuff set up for the pour. I need everything to be in close proximity when I start. What you see me wheeling in right now is a new tool, and this is the mud mixer. If you watch my last concrete video, I used a concrete mixer, and that works great, and I still plan to use it in the future, but it was very labor intensive. While it's faster than mixing concrete with a shovel, it's much slower than using a mud mixer. For example, this would be an added step that would be eliminated. The mud mixer is a tool that requires electricity. A 3-prong extension cord is preferred. The machine is equipped with an inline GFCI power cord. If you haven't seen this before, you'll get to see how it works in a bit, but one of the things I think is pretty cool about this is you can hook a water hose directly to it. But another cool thing is the machine actually comes with a separate hose, so you still have water for whatever and even needs to clean up. One of the accessories for this machine is this hopper extension. This allowed me to put more concrete in the mixer. Another accessory is this chute extension, which allows you to extend your reach an additional 18 inches. As I mentioned, I haven't used this machine before, but the instructions are written right here on the machine. First thing is to set the amount of water I need. I set the dial to 45, then I turn the machine on. I'll let that run for a few seconds to wet the chute, then turn it off. As I was getting accustomed to the machine, this is the part I'm most excited about. Taking a bag and dropping it into the mixer. I'm still trying to determine the best way to drop it, but either way, it's gonna cut the bag. You just need to grab the bag and remove it as the material falls out. That was a lot easier than having to keep track of a utility knife, lifting up an open bag, dumping it into a mixer, and manually adding water. So now the machine's on and should start to see concrete come out the chute. Before I let too much out, I figured it was a good time to play with the water control dial. I dialed it back some and I can instantly see how thick the concrete was coming out. So I put it back to around 45 and left it there for the rest of the way. Aside from filming, there's two other things I have to focus on. That's spreading the concrete and continuously drop bags inside the mixer. A few times I was unable to keep up, so in that case I just turned the machine off. As shown, the mixer has wheels, so if I needed to, I can relocate it to a better spot to pour. But because the ground is not level, it's probably easier to just leave it in one spot. Even stationary, I can still turn the mixer. I repeated the process of dropping a bag and spreading the mix. I did this repeatedly until I was able to fill up the form. If I had to guess, I had the machine running for about 15 to 20 minutes. Now I'll move on to screeding the top. I've used a straight piece of 2x4 in the past to do this, but I don't want to keep up with a piece of wood, so I purchased a tool. As I'm getting to the final part, I'll use a bucket to collect the rest out of the mixer. As I'm sure that this is all I would need, I'll set the bucket off to the side and start cleaning up the mixer. I purchased this concrete vibrator a few years ago. Now, I'm using it because I actually never used it and I wanted to see if it would improve the form, especially along the edges. In a way, this is a little bit of practice for me so I can get a better feel for how I can improve my concrete forms in the future. I had some concrete left over in the bucket, so I'll use some of that to fill this form back out, being that I created little pockets with the vibrator. When doing a concrete slab right after screeding the top, you then want to use a float, which is generally used to level and compact the concrete. I often skip that and go right to the finishing trowel. I'm just more comfortable with it. There's usually a waiting period right after the initial pour. For me, this is a good time to go ahead and start cleaning up. It's about 25 minutes-ish since I finished making the pour. I'm gonna trowel over it once more just to try and get down some of my sharp lines that was left in it. I'll wait an extra 15 to 20 minutes before I start to put a finish on. It wouldn't be Florida without bugs. Look at this little guy. It's about 50 minutes after making the initial pour, and now the concrete's starting to harden some, so I'm gonna go ahead and take the hand edger and start to put a profile around the edge. The concrete's hard enough right now for me to put the finish on. I'm going for a smooth finish here. Let's say you wanted a broom finish, right about now would be the time to go ahead and broom it. It's been about 2 hours since I've made the initial pour. Normally I'd leave the form for about 3 days and then I'll pull the form. One of the positives to pulling the form early is so that if you needed to address some of the concrete on the side, you could. The sides came out pretty good. Not perfect, but I'm not mad at it. Well, for the time being, I'm gonna wash these off and throw them in my pile of boards for the next concrete project. It's about a week later and it's been ready for a few days now. This shed is the reason why I made the slab. Now all I have to do is get it on top. The shed looks quite flimsy, but it's been through 2 hurricanes already. The trick was to mount it to the slab. Then I had 2 D-rings mounted to the wall and I used a ratcheting strap to hold it there in place. I'm quite happy with the outcome. I just have to do one more thing, and that's secure the shed to the slab. If you were doing this project from scratch, this would cost you roughly $110 for the price of the materials. Being that I had some of the materials on hand, this cost me around $65. Obviously, tools are not included. And be sure to check the video description for additional details and tools that I used in this video. I've been ignoring this tilting AC condenser for quite some time. I'm not looking forward to it, but I know I need to address it. The minute you check something off the to-do list, something else get added. This is how it started, and this is the results. I'm Glenn. Catch you on the next one.